Yes, it's an active shooter. Fully briefed as to where we are right now. It's a shame. It's a horrible thing. Horrible that things like this take place. And we'll have more to say about it later.
Today, a shooting at Florida State University has left at least 2 killed and 6 injured. And you just heard from President Donald Trump, who was asked to react to the news while it was still developing. And as you just heard him say, things like this take place. Cenk, do you think that that is going to be any modicum of comfort for the families and friends of the victims?
No, of course not. And so, look, I agree with Trump in an ironic kind of way. Now, to be fair, he said it's horrible. It's horrible that things like this take place, right? So, okay, sure, that we all agree to that. But he did seem a little bit like, well, what am I gonna do? Things like this take place. And it's a little bit of a Rorschach test, depending on how you see that clip. But to me, the part that is the ironic agreement is, guys, I don't think that our politicians are going to do anything about this. And you've heard me say this, now dozens of times. It might even be hundreds at this point after all the mass shootings that we cover, and we've covered a lot of them. We're the mass shooting capital of the world, and our politicians don't care. I mean, another way of phrasing it is we're the mass murder capital of the world. And by a lot, it's not even close. And our politicians never, ever, ever do anything about it. So yeah, things are like this are going to keep taking place, and our politicians are never going to represent us. And now they're on a loop. So years and years ago, I used to tell you, listen, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but shootings like this are going to happen near you soon, because everybody kept getting surprised, like, oh, I can't believe there was a mass shooting near me. At this point, you should be surprised if there hasn't been a mass shooting near you. There's one every single day in America. This one just happens to be a little bit more spectacular. It's on a college campus, a lot of people killed and wounded, etc. Spectacular, and obviously in a terrible way, in the wrong direction. But now it's gotten so bad, Yaz, that it's looping. This is the second shooting on FSU's campus. An earlier one was in 2014. So now every place is going to get 2 mass shootings. So you can look forward to that, because our politicians will never, ever do anything.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And it's also a little interesting that we're covering this story when it relates very closely to a story we're going to cover later on in the show. So as far as the shooting goes, here's what we know so far. The suspected shooter's name is Phoenix Ikner. The suspect is the son of a sheriff's deputy and had access to one of her weapons. The suspect was shot by responders and is currently hospitalized with non-life-threatening injuries. According to local law enforcement, the 2 victims who were killed were not FSU students. Chris Coots, 51, was a professor of urban planning at the school, and it was said that he was baffled by what had happened. This is the second one since I've been here, he said, as he walked to his car after having sheltered in place. He was referring to a 2014 shooting in which a gunman wounded 3 people in the university library. Of course, that is what Cenk was just referring to. An FSU student on the scene called out Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, saying, "I'm going to call on Governor Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. This stuff keeps going on. We're praying every day. Praying is good. Spirituality is good, but prayers don't do much. It's good for the soul, but is this still happening? I think it is. So we need to make some gun reforms." And that is from an FSU student. And again, as I said, we are going to talk a little bit about this in another story that we're covering later on in the show. So it is just interesting that this is such a late addition to the show, but we had to cover it. We had to come up and mention it. But yeah, I agree with Cenk. How many times can we have this exact same conversation? Every time there's a school shooting, we have to go through the same rigmarole. We have to wait for our politicians and leaders to just acknowledge that this was a bad thing, as if we need to hear that from them still. And the thing is, originally, like the thought would be, oh, let them acknowledge that this is horrible, because if they understand that it's horrible, then they'll do something about it. But now we know they're not going to do anything about it. So something needs to, a lot of things need to change all at once before this actually does get addressed, because as Cenk pointed out, they know that this is a problem and they don't care. They're not going to do anything about it. They've shown us that for the last 20 years.
Yeah. So the last couple of things here. Look, I'm far left on this issue, which means that I'm right in the center of the globe. Like the rest of the world thinks we're all nuts for how much we allow guns in this country. So I would let you have a gun, but you'd have to have it in a locker, not in your home. I know a lot of people would be like, "Oh, you're crazy." And by the way, I know that'll never pass in America. Right? At least in my lifetime, I would be shocked if that passed in America. But that's the position I'm for, because that's the position that works. That's the position that's gotten Japan to about 0 gun homicides. But apparently the American people are willing to accept tens of thousands of gun homicides and suicides, by the way. And so look, and that leads to the last thing. There are a couple of things that the American people do agree on, right? So universal background checks, over 90% of gun owners are in favor of that because they don't plan to commit a crime with their gun. So they're like, I don't mind if you have the serial number, et cetera. That's just very logical for us to be able to track criminals. The second is red flag laws. So if someone is problematic, either they're a clear criminal or they have significant mental health issues, should we take their guns away? Of course, of course. And a giant percentage of Americans agree with that. There's some folks who are in the gun absolutists who are like, yeah, no, if you're mentally insane, I think you should have an Uzi. Okay, but most Americans don't agree with that. So my political philosophy: take the wins where you can find them. We should fight super hard for universal background checks and for red flag laws, and then work through the decades to get, if we can convince the American people to get to my position on this, I think we'll save tens of thousands of lives, but that's not the place to start right now, because right now that position is not popular enough to win, right? So, but for God's sake, let's at least do something to mitigate the nonstop disaster of mass shootings in America.
Yeah. So this is still a developing story. We'll hopefully have more information on it later. But again, I'm not holding my breath for any information regarding any kind of legislation that would come out of this.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.